Hello there, friends. Welcome back. You know, it would be pretty cool if the subject of this video was what used to be the contents of this box. The old witch model from Aurora. Does anybody remember these old Aurora models? I think I might have had the Hunchback and the Wolfman, perhaps. I think I might have even had Godzilla. But no, the model that used to be in this box is long gone. Well, possibly long gone. It might still be in the house that I grew up in somewhere. Look at all the possible ASMR triggers that the witch has in this picture. Scissors. You got the wooden spoon. Everybody likes a nice wood tapping video. You've got knife and glass, broom bristles. I think she missed her calling. But no, we're not here to talk about the witch, unfortunately. No, we're here to rummage through the current contents of the box. These old plastic Army Men toys. One of my favorite rummage style of videos is the crayon rummage video, because there's something about that waxy, papery, very tactile sound that you get from crayons jostling against each other. Plastic Army Men don't sound exactly the same, but there are some similar aspects, and it's the closest homage I can pay to the venerable crayon rummage video, so we're gonna do a little bit of that today, as well as ramble through some memories of playing with simple toys like these as a kid. you will see that the box has undergone some more modern repair techniques with this loud fluorescent orange duct tape, which I am fairly certain was applied by my son. But I have no doubt that the box was probably falling apart. And maybe as we're rummaging along here, we'll take a closer look at a few things. I guess the most obvious pieces that are different from the rest are these two beat up little trailer thingies. I don't ever remember having a Jeep or some other kind of vehicle to pull these things around, but somehow the trailers have survived with the rest of the army men, such as they are. This one clearly used to have something on the top here. Set him aside and also take out this other one. I do believe this searchlight type of a contraption used to be mounted here. And we have a control panel here with a gauge and some buttons or dials and things to control the searchlight. We'll set him off to the side too, leaving us with a box of plastic army men. I only really remember the green ones when I would play with these decades ago, although now there are a few off-white ones in the box and a couple of these light brown ones, although he's had a weapon malfunction, clearly, and a few gray ones. But the green are the ones that I remember. And before we're done, I'll try to find my one or two favorite army men from back in the day. And maybe we'll single out several of them and give him some close-ups, like this fellow. I think I only have one of him. I think that's a minesweeper. I have a brother that I grew up with. He's a couple of years younger than me. And we grew up on the south edge of a medium-sized city. And I say the south edge because where we lived was really the dividing line between the city and the country. Meaning, if I rode my bike south from where we lived, I was very quickly in what I would call county roads. Roads that divided farm fields. The residences got fewer and farther between. There were no businesses out there. It was a rural county setting. And north of where we lived was the city, with all the businesses and traffic and residential structures. Since I was in third grade, we lived in this property on the south side of this town, and it was about 4 acres. And I only realize now how lucky we were to have that much land to play around in. I would say that a little less than half of the property was wooded, and the rest of it was flat and open. My mom had a really big garden on one part of it, and my dad repaired cars on much of the rest of it. And sometimes he would be involved in a project there at the property that required some fill dirt to be brought in from someplace else. And when that happened, the dirt would be, brought in, and it would be placed in big piles there somewhere on the property in one of the open areas. And when you are a boy and you have a younger brother and you have some army men at your disposal and you have really big piles of fill dirt brought in, well, the rest of the play date basically writes itself, because when you're an army man, big piles of fill dirt are essentially mountains. And so my brother and I would take these very army men And we usually divide up the forces based on how many of each type there were. And we would deploy our green plastic forces across our newfound hilly terrain. The other nice thing about big dirt piles, especially in a long, hot, dry summer, are the dirt clods. Because dirt clods make the ultimate army man projectiles. And when they impact something, their sudden, impactful decomposition kicks up a nice cloud of dust, which is a perfect surrogate for smoke when you are a young boy playing with army men. And so we would deploy our forces and do battle. And the funny thing was, or at least how I remember it now, is that we didn't really pit our forces against each other as often as we pitted them against some superior third force, like aliens or Godzilla-sized monsters that were threatening to wreak havoc. It was very easy for us to play the Godzilla-sized monsters, of course. And when you're simulating an alien attack, dirt clods are the perfect artillery from above. Looking back on those times, I love the nostalgia of that memory. I love the fact that looking at a box full of army men reminds me of my brother and reminds me of the kind of a partially outdoor childhood that we had. Not to say that we got along all the time. Obviously, we did not. We were normal siblings, and we were subject to all of the traditional differences of opinion. But I love that I can look at an army man and think about a hot summer day, outdoors, with my brother, wiping the sweat off our faces, usually shirtless with no no thought given to common sense concerns like sunscreen on our shoulders. Common sense wasn't quite as common then, it would seem. Teaming up with my brother, marching our armies together as we tried to decide how best to fend off the alien attacks from above. We were not always successful, of course, but the army men always managed to make it back into the box to fight another day. But not every excursion was a desert battle out in the open on the dirt hills. I mentioned that we did have trees as well, so sometimes we would take the army men to the woods and have jungle adventures. The floor of the woods was always strewn with various sticks that had fallen from the trees, and it was very easy to get little forked twigs and stick them into the ground and put little cross members, and you can make little wooden twig structures that you could lean pieces of sod against or cover with leaves and make little buildings that the army men could use as bases of operation. That's what our jungle operations usually consisted of. When my son was of a certain age, that perfect window of boyhood that is captivated by simple toys such as these, he would find this box. It was always fascinating to him that these were the very army men that I played with when I was his age. It's like he was able to somehow look back in time and catch a glimpse of my own boyhood by finding these toys. And we would go out into our much, much smaller backyard and play around with the army men as well. And I would show him how my brother and I made our little twiggy buildings, and we covered them with leaves and we stationed the army men in them, just like my brother and I did all those decades ago. His army man phase didn't really last that long, but this might seem very silly. They're just pieces of plastic, but it really meant a lot to me that he was interested in catching this small glimpse of my own childhood and sharing a bit of that with me, and that I was able to do that with him as well. I do think there's still something to be said for this kind of play, this kind of engagement. I'm not saying it's better or worse than any other, but it really meant a lot to me that we were able to share a few Army Men sessions together. Now, I don't know why, but when I was a boy, for some reason, this is the guy that I always imagined in a leadership position. For some reason, this guy was always the guy running the show. And I was a little disappointed to realize when I sorted through these the other day that the guy, the commander guy that I always had, that I always played with, somehow isn't in this set anymore. And I know that because my guy from back in the day had a scratch in the plastic right at his shoulder here, which of course I always assumed was a war wound, a flesh wound, some battle damage, and he was always the guy I looked for him, and he was always the guy I picked to command my troops. And then my other favorite guy, and it's kind of funny, I don't know what this says about my personality, but you've got all these different guys and all the different weapons and the roles that they play, but my favorite guy was always the radio guy. And not just any radio guy. I don't know if I can... Oh. I always had one radio guy that was different than the others, and this is the guy. For some reason, I was always drawn to the guy with the transmitter on his back. You know, the alien monsters are changing positions, and we've got to call in reinforcements, or we've got to let the rest of our troops know that there's been a change in direction, right? And you needed the radio guy to to call in that information. You need that situational awareness, and he's the guy. I guess even with Army Men, I was a bit of a nerd, drawn to the guy with the walkie-talkie strapped to his back. Just a little ramble today. A ramble and a rummage. A ramble about play and simplicity and imagination. And the bond between siblings. It would mean a great deal to me if this topic triggered any of your own memories, your own childhood, your own siblings. It would mean a lot to me if you would share that in the comments of this video. I know they don't sound exactly like crayons, but they're not bad. Thanks for joining me again, friends. Take good care of yourselves. Please let me hear from you in the comments. And I'll see you all again next time. Bye bye.